The hearing room was tense. For weeks, the House Judiciary Committee had been locked in a battle of words and wits, but nothing had shifted the momentum, until Pam Bondi took the floor. Nadler, confident in his legal arguments, had steeled the committee to his defense, dismissing accusations as politically motivated. But Bondi's unexpected and precise dismantling of his stance would become the turning point that changed everything. Pam Bondi, a former Florida Attorney General known for her sharp legal mind and no-nonsense style, entered the committee hearing with a clear strategy. Unlike the others who relied on rehearsed talking points and defensive rhetoric, Bondi came armed with a detailed breakdown of Nadler's defense, point by point. She challenged the very foundation of his arguments, exposing contradictions and legal oversights that had gone unnoticed or unaddressed. What made Bondi's approach so effective was her ability to connect complex legal concepts to real-world implications in a way that resonated with both committee members and the public. She questioned the legitimacy of Nadler's claims regarding due process and constitutional protections, arguing that his interpretation was not only flawed but dangerously lenient. As she methodically unraveled his defense, the mood in the room shifted from confident dismissal to uneasy reconsideration. Committee members who had been firmly aligned with Nadler began exchanging uncertain glances. The public, watching through live streams and news coverage, sensed something significant was happening. Bondi's performance was more than a legal argument, it was a narrative shift, casting doubt on the committee's previous assumptions and opening the door for a new direction in the investigation. The impact of Pam Bondi's rebuttal extended beyond the hearing room. As her arguments circulated in news reports and social media, they sparked a fresh wave of debate among political analysts, legal experts, and the general public. Many began to question the solidity of Jerry Nadler's defense, which until then had seemed unassailable. Bondi's detailed critique revealed vulnerabilities that opponents quickly seized upon, forcing the committee to confront uncomfortable truths. Inside the committee, the atmosphere grew increasingly fractious. Some members, inspired by Bondi's clarity and conviction, began to voice doubts and demand a reassessment of the strategy. Nadler, once the unquestioned leader of the committee's legal defense, found his authority challenged as cracks appeared in the unity he had fostered. Behind closed doors, discussions turned tense, with factions emerging over how to proceed. Bondi's intervention also influenced public opinion, shifting the narrative from partisan posturing to a more nuanced examination of the legal and constitutional questions at stake. This shift put additional pressure on the committee members to act with greater transparency and rigor. The media dubbed Bondi's moment in the spotlight, the turning point, a phrase that would echo through political commentary for weeks. As the committee prepared for the next phase of the investigation, it was clear that Bondi's breaking down of Nadler's defense had altered the course of the proceedings. The balance of power within the committee had shifted, and the legal battle had entered a new, unpredictable stage. In the days that followed, the effects of Pam Bondi's sharp dismantling of Jerry Nadler's defense rippled through Washington's political landscape. Committee members who had been hesitant or lukewarm in their support for Nadler found themselves re-evaluating their positions, facing mounting pressure from constituents and party leaders alike. Bondi's clear and compelling legal arguments had not only undermined Nadler's stance but also invigorated opposition voices within the committee who had previously remained silent. Nadler, recognizing the gravity of the moment, sought to regroup. He convened private meetings with key allies, attempting to shore up support and craft a revised defense strategy. However, Bondi's attack had exposed fundamental weaknesses in the committee's approach, weaknesses that could no longer be masked by partisan loyalty or procedural maneuvers. The dynamic in the committee room had shifted from controlled debate to cautious recalibration. Meanwhile, the public's engagement with the investigation deepened. Bondi's breakdown had been widely covered by major news outlets and dissected by legal commentators, who praised her ability to distill complex issues into accessible arguments. This coverage amplified calls for accountability and transparency, increasing the stakes for every committee member. The narrative was no longer simply about political rivalry, it was about the integrity of the legal process itself. In this charged environment, the committee's work took on a new urgency. The turning point that Bondi's intervention created was not just about defeating Nadler's defense. It was about redefining the committee's mission and reshaping its future course. The battle lines were redrawn, and the next steps would test the resolve and leadership of everyone involved. As the committee moved forward in the aftermath of Pam Bondi's decisive moment, the internal dynamics shifted dramatically. Members who had once aligned themselves closely with Jerry Nadler now found themselves caught between loyalty and the undeniable force of Bondi's arguments. The growing fractures within the committee led to intense debates over strategy, with some advocating for a harder-line approach while others pushed for more measured, legally grounded methods. Bondi, though no longer a committee member, had become a central figure in the unfolding political drama. Her insights were sought after by members across the aisle, and her public appearances energized constituents who demanded greater scrutiny and accountability. In many ways, Bondi had become a symbol of rigorous legal challenge and political tenacity, a reminder that the strength of a committee's defense depended not just on party allegiance but on sound, persuasive argumentation. Jerry Nadler faced an uphill battle to reclaim control. His efforts to reassert leadership were hampered by the visible cracks in the committee's unity and by the mounting criticism from both inside and outside the political establishment. The legal questions Bondi raised could not be dismissed as mere political theater. They struck at the heart of the committee's credibility and the legitimacy of its investigative mandate. The turning point created by Bondi's breakdown of Nadler's defense ultimately forced a re-evaluation of how the committee conducted its work. It inspired new procedural reforms and heightened demands for transparency, shaping the investigation's trajectory in ways that would have lasting impact. More than a mere exchange of legal arguments, it was a pivotal moment that underscored the fragile balance between politics, law, and public trust. The aftermath of Pam Bondi's groundbreaking challenge to Jerry Nadler's defense echoed well beyond the confines of the committee hearing room. What began as a sharply contested legal exchange evolved into a profound shift in the political and procedural landscape. The committee, once marked by relative cohesion under Nadler's leadership, now faced a reckoning fueled by Bondi's incisive critique, a reckoning that questioned not just the substance of the defense but the very approach the committee had taken from the outset. This turning point sparked a ripple effect throughout Capitol Hill. Legislators and political strategists re-evaluated their positions and tactics, acknowledging that public trust hinged on more than partisan loyalty. It depended on the committee's ability to engage transparently and rigorously with the constitutional and legal principles at stake. Bondi's methodical dissection of Nadler's arguments became a case study in how legal expertise combined with strategic communication could reshape political outcomes. Internally, the committee embarked on a series of reforms aimed at restoring credibility and reinforcing procedural fairness. Hearings were restructured to allow for more balanced debate, and new oversight measures were introduced to ensure that legal defenses could be scrutinized thoroughly and impartially. These changes marked a subtle but significant departure from the previous modus operandi, signaling a commitment to due process that resonated with a broader public yearning for accountability. For Jerry Nadler, the episode was a moment of both challenge and transformation. While the immediate impact weakened his standing, it also forced him to adapt and recalibrate his approach, fostering a more collaborative and legally nuanced leadership style. Pam Bondi's intervention had not only shifted the committee's course but had set a new standard for political discourse, one where legal precision and public engagement went hand in hand. In the end, the turning point was not simply a defeat or victory for any single figure. It was a watershed moment that changed how the committee operated and how politics and law intersected in the arena of national governance. Bondi's breakdown of Nadler's defense became a defining episode, a reminder that in the highest levels of political conflict, clarity, conviction, and expertise could decisively alter the balance of power and direction of policy. In the months that followed, the legacy of Pam Bondi's breakdown of Jerry Nadler's defense continued to reverberate across the political landscape. The committee's work took on a new tone, one that was less about partisan grandstanding and more about rigorous examination of evidence and legal principles. Bondi's intervention had set a precedent that legal arguments needed to withstand not only political scrutiny but also the unforgiving lens of constitutional fidelity. The committee's renewed commitment to transparency and due process began to rebuild public trust, which had eroded in previous months amid accusations of bias and procedural irregularities. Members from both parties started to approach their roles with a greater sense of responsibility, recognizing that their actions would be judged not only by their political allies but also by the broader electorate watching closely. Beyond the committee, Bondi's role as a legal force in the political arena inspired a broader discussion about the importance of legal expertise and legislative oversight. Media outlets highlighted her ability to translate complex legal issues into accessible language, empowering citizens to better understand the stakes involved. This, in turn, fostered a more informed and engaged public, one less willing to accept simplistic narratives and more demanding of accountability from elected officials. For Jerry Nadler, the episode became a pivotal chapter in his political career. Though initially shaken by the disruption Bondi caused, he ultimately embraced the challenge as an opportunity to grow. He worked to strengthen his legal teams and adopted a more collaborative approach with committee members across the aisle, striving to rebuild bridges and foster a culture of mutual respect. Pam Bondi's breaking down of Nadler's defense was more than just a moment of political theater. It was a catalyst for change. It reshaped how committees approached their oversight duties, how political actors engaged with legal processes, and how the public perceived the delicate balance between politics and justice. The turning point she created underscored a vital truth. In the realm of governance, clear-headed analysis and unwavering commitment to principle can change the course of history. As the committee moved forward, the lessons from that day remained etched in its proceedings, a testament to the power of one decisive moment to transform not only a committee's trajectory but also the broader landscape of American politics. As the dust settled on the heated battles within the committee, the political ecosystem began to feel the lasting effects of Pam Bondi's intervention. Her precise, unrelenting breakdown of Jerry Nadler's defense had cracked open a dialogue that extended far beyond legislative chambers. It became a catalyst for a nationwide conversation about the nature of power, accountability, and the rule of law. The reverberations were felt in think tanks, law schools, and public forums where experts debated the evolving relationship between politics and justice. Scholars analyzed Bondi's strategy as a masterclass in legal advocacy within a political context, noting how her methodical approach had not only exposed weaknesses but had also demanded a higher standard of evidence and reasoning from those entrusted with wielding governmental authority. This moment also influenced the way future committees would prepare for and conduct oversight investigations. Staffers and legislators alike began placing greater emphasis on legal precision and cross-party collaboration, recognizing that credibility hinged on more than just political victory. The idea that oversight should transcend partisan agendas and seek truth with integrity gained momentum, shaping reforms in committee procedures nationwide. Meanwhile, Pam Bondi's role evolved from a formidable critic to a respected voice on the intersection of law and politics. She was invited to speak at universities, policy forums, and media panels, where she emphasized the importance of legal literacy and civic engagement. Her example encouraged a new generation of leaders to approach political conflict not simply as a game of winning or losing but as a responsibility to uphold democratic principles. For Jerry Nadler, the challenge Bondi posed became a defining impetus for personal and professional growth. He invested in cultivating deeper expertise within his team and worked to rebuild fractured relationships across the aisle. Though the episode had initially threatened to diminish his influence, it ultimately reinforced the value of humility, openness to critique, and the ongoing pursuit of justice above politics. At its core, the turning point marked by Bondi's dismantling of Nadler's defense was a testament to the power of clarity and conviction in the often murky world of political maneuvering. It illuminated the fragile but vital connection between law and governance, reminding all who watched that the strength of a democracy depends on its willingness to question, to listen, and to hold its leaders accountable. As the committee continued its work, the legacy of that critical moment remained a guiding beacon. A reminder that in the complex dance of politics, sometimes a single voice, armed with truth and tenacity, can change the course of history and reshape the future of governance itself. In the years following Pam Bondi's pivotal appearance before the committee, historians would come to mark that moment as a defining shift, not only within the specific investigation it influenced, but in the broader trajectory of congressional oversight itself. Bondi's confrontation with Jerry Nadler had not merely exposed legal flaws or political contradictions. It had laid bare the fragility of the system when driven by inertia and unchecked authority, and the extraordinary potential for course correction when courage and competence converge. What distinguished Bondi's intervention in retrospect was not just the content of her critique, but the clarity of her intent. She did not seek personal vindication or political grandstanding. Instead, she represented a call to principle, to the idea that justice, when stripped of bias, narrative control, and partisan theater, must still be able to stand on its own. Her methodical breakdown of Nadler's legal scaffolding was not a demolition for the sake of destruction. It was a rebuilding of expectations, a recalibration of the standards to which oversight must be held. Over time, the ripple effects became codified in policy and practice. Committee structures were reorganized across both chambers of Congress to allow for greater inclusion of independent legal review and bipartisan counsel. Transparency reforms were passed that made it easier for the public to follow the evidence trail without media filters. And most importantly, there was a gradual cultural shift, a recognition that oversight was not a weapon but a constitutional duty, and that real credibility came from substance, not spin. Pam Bondi, though never seeking a permanent place in elected office, became an enduring figure in legal political discourse. Her name was cited in academic papers, her speeches were studied in law seminars, and her approach was emulated by future counsel preparing for high-stakes appearances before committees and courts alike. She had become a symbol of a rare kind of intervention, principled, disciplined, and transformative. For Nadler, the experience ultimately served as a pivot point. Though the blow to his legal argument had been sharp and public, he responded in a manner that surprised even his critics. He re-engaged in constitutional scholarship, held forums on legal ethics and governance, and became an advocate for the very procedural reforms that had arisen from his own unraveling. Bondi had not destroyed his career, she had, paradoxically, revived its purpose. The committee, once on the brink of losing public faith, found itself reinvigorated. It became a chamber where arguments carried weight again, not because of which party delivered them, but because of how well they held up to scrutiny. It was a place where facts mattered, where questions were not rhetorical but consequential, and where legal reasoning returned to the center of political process. And in this, the legacy of that moment, the moment Bondi broke down Nadler's defense, was sealed not in spectacle, but in quiet, lasting transformation. It had not been a media stunt, nor a partisan ambush. It was something far rarer in Washington, a sincere confrontation with truth, and a reinvestment in the ideals upon which legislative power rests. Long after the cameras stopped rolling and the headlines faded, those who remembered that day knew something had changed. A turning point had been reached, not just for a committee or a Congress, but for the idea that in a democracy, every defense must be able to withstand the test of reason. History does not always announce its turning points with thunder. Sometimes they arrive quietly, in a pause between statements, in the steady voice of someone unwilling to yield to political gravity. That day when Pam Bondi stood before the Judiciary Committee and dismantled Jerry Nadler's long-held defense, was one of those moments. No theatrics, no theatrically raised voices. Just fact, law, precision, and a sharp, unflinching challenge to a powerful man's reasoning. But the impact, though subtle at first, grew in magnitude over time. It was not just that Bondi had won an argument, it was that she had reset the terms of political debate. She forced Congress to remember something it had too often forgotten, that oversight, if it is to be respected, must be grounded in truth, not in tribalism. That defenses must not be merely defensible, they must be correct. That the law is not a partisan instrument but the spine of American governance. In the years that followed, much changed. Political polarization remained, of course, it is an old American habit, but the way committees operated shifted. Staff attorneys, once sidelined in favor of cable-ready performers, were now central voices in investigative planning. Hearings were no longer structured purely for sound bites, they became slower, more deliberate and, most remarkably, more bipartisan. Journalists began citing the Bondi standard, a shorthand for the expectation that arguments presented to the public must be able to withstand professional legal scrutiny. Pundits across the political spectrum grudgingly agreed. Bondi hadn't just scored a blow against Nadler, she had elevated the entire discourse. She showed that clarity and courage, when joined with deep knowledge, could do more than win debates. They could restore trust. As for Jerry Nadler, he eventually spoke openly about the moment. In an interview years later, he called Bondi's challenge, the professional defeat that became my personal reawakening. It forced him to reevaluate, to listen more deeply, and to place legal truth above political calculation. His later work, advocating for reforms in congressional oversight and legal ethics, was seen by many as a quiet redemption arc. Pam Bondi, meanwhile, never returned to office, but her influence outlasted most of her peers.